Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Just in the middle of switching gears here, I was moderating a great discussion, actually, that is still going on with the city of Wilmington community leadership. That is going on on the Community Champions of Delaware page. So if you are a resident of the city of Wilmington, not that I don't want you to spend time with me, but I'm going to recommend that you go to the Community Champions Delaware Facebook page, put in your questions, and listen to what some of the leadership is talking about, their plans, the roadblocks, and so forth that they need your help with. And more important than anything, the vote and the census, right? So welcome, welcome, welcome. My name is Tanya Bain, for those of you who don't know me. And this is my show, Talks with Tanya. And what we do here is we are all about educating, informing, impacting, and connecting by sharing information to lead us to really living whole life success. So that means that we are healing on all levels, that we're operating in our best selves on all levels, mentally, spiritually, physically, financially, familially, all of the least, so that we can make a difference not only in our immediate community, but also in the world around us. There's so much going on. And it's so important that as citizens, as people, as humans, we use every tool and every piece of wisdom that we have acquired so far on our journey, all of those lessons that we've learned, all of the books that you've read or the lives that you have watched, take that information, put it into action, and make a difference. All right, make a difference. Because if you are not part of the solution, if you're not engaged in some way, shape, or form, you don't have to leave the house to be engaged. You can make some phone calls. You can, check on your neighbors. But at some level, you don't have to do it how I do it. All right. But you need to be part of the solution. And in order to do that, you really need to be engaged. Hey, Sarah, thanks for joining. Congratulations to our Teacher of the Year. Ha! I am not surprised. Absolutely. We do need to get that vote out. So I have an amazing guest, and I will tell you a little bit more about him, but I'm going to bring up our guest this evening, Dr. Robert Ross. Welcome, Dr. Ross. Welcome to Talks with Tanya. You are on. You are on live. Yes. All the way from California. How are you impacted by the fires out there?
They're starting to get a little too close for comfort. We got one fire that's about two towns away from where we live in the foothills, just above Pasadena. So, we're just patiently waiting for the firefighters to do what they need to do and try and get it under control. But we're going to talk a lot about health tonight. And this is a man-made health issue, all these fires. That's climate change. So these things are not just accidents, they're man-made issues, and hopefully we can get into that conversation tonight.
Absolutely. So I'm going to share just a little bit about our guest. Dr. Robert Ross is the President and Chief Executive Officer of the California Endowment. And the California Endowment was a foundation, is a foundation that was established in 1996 to address the health needs of Californians. And I just want to, clarify that I know he's in California, but I believe that there are similar issues, not only across the country, but across, the world. The doctor has served as the Director of Health and Human Services in San Diego County, the Commissioner of Public Health for the City of Philadelphia, and he has an extensive health and philanthropy background, along with that of being a public health executive, and on the side, a clinician. I just wanted to mention to you that Dr. Ross received his undergraduate degrees, Master in Public Administration, and his medical degree from the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. And I have to say that I was kind enough to allow him to be my housemate for a short period of time, where he learned I don't cook. I'm going to let the cat out of the bag. I'm really especially honored that I grew up with Dr. Ross. He is my first cousin, and has been a brother and a role model to me. Watch the stories that you tell, Bobby. And it's
I don't know who's got the most dirt on who, Tanya. I'm gonna keep my mouth shut.
I have more than you. We'll just here, but it's just a testament the power of a family can do in order to make a difference. Okay, we both grew up in the South Bronx, and many of the same blights that surrounded us then are the same that are now. So we to come from, but we all what happened in our households and in our neighborhoods. Okay, we were able to be in the position where we are now in order to share with you. Dr. Ross, I am going to kind of keep track of the comments here. Hey, Kenya says hi. Another Penn alumni. So Dr. And let me get it back here. About where do we go from here? There are such pressures and disparities in healthcare that I believe really roll themselves over into the social justice issues that we are dealing with today. Why don't you share with us a little bit about that?
Yeah, thank you. So I had a rude introduction into community health, Tanya, back during the crack cocaine epidemic. Up at that time, so this was the late 80s, early 90s. And at that time, I was a practicing pediatrician in Camden, New Jersey. I also practiced a little bit in North Philly. And when crack cocaine was introduced to South Camden, where our clinic practice was, it was a game changer. It changed the world. It's not that Camden was a nirvana heaven-like community. It was a tough and difficult community. But when crack was introduced, it just went through the floor. And it was my introduction into what I would later understand was what we call in public health and community health, the social determinants of health. That we now know one of the best predictors of your health status and your life expectancy in the United States of America is your zip code. Where you live has a tremendous impact on your health status. Now, that doesn't mean that you're statistically destined to live a certain amount of time, but and you can see this everywhere. There are parts of Delaware, probably parts of Wilmington, where one zip code, the life expectancy is 15, 20 years shorter than in another zip code, right? You had that difference out here. The life expectancy in Beverly Hills out here in LA is about 20 to 25 years longer than in Compton, and they're only 6 miles away from each other down the freeway. Right. And so you see this phenomenon all around the country, but it was the crack cocaine epidemic when before crack was invented in the late 80s, only rich people could buy cocaine because it was really expensive. And then when crack was invented by some evil genius and introduced into neighborhoods across the country, all of a sudden poor people could buy and hopeless people could buy cocaine and buy crack for $5 and $10 a hit. And so when crack got introduced into these communities and these neighborhoods, we saw increases in domestic violence, in child abuse, in gun violence, in infant mortality, in crack babies being born. Many of those babies, I attended those deliveries as a pediatrician. These babies were born at a pound and a half, 2 pound babies. And so, teen pregnancy. So we saw enormous health issues from the introduction of crack cocaine. And the nation's response, Ronald Reagan was president then, the national response, because crack cocaine was introduced into Black and brown communities, was to criminalize addiction. So instead of a massive increase in mental health services and drug treatment services and housing supports and job programs because people are hopeless and don't see a future, so they turn to crack. Instead of seeing that, we saw a 400% increase in the prison population during that period of time because of 3 strikes and you're out, and criminalizing, basically the United States criminalized the health issue and criminalized hopelessness. And that was my wake-up call. That's when the first time for me as a practicing pediatrician, I turned to public health because I wanted to see the community as a patient rather than the individual as a patient. And at the California Endowment, we focus on community health, not just individual health. And that's the kind of work that we support. But that phenomenon is not just South LA or Compton. That's Wilmington, that's North Philly, that's Camden. To this day, you still see zip codes and communities that have terrible health outcomes because of the structural racist issues that are embedded in those communities.
So, the question that I get all the time, they say, Tanya, you have all these great people that come on. We want to hear, how do we individually make a pivot and really begin to impact this from where we sit, your average citizen? How do we do that?
Yeah. Well, the pathway to wellness in this country, we're convinced that our foundation is civic engagement and civic participation and community participation. Voting, vote. This way we control the power of who's in Congress, of who's in the White House, of who's in the legislature, of who's on these city councils that can make healthy decisions for our communities that have been at the wrong end of racial justice or racial injustice and social injustice for a long time. Then there's activism, and I'm going to quote, civil rights icon John Lewis, who died recently. It was about a month ago or so, and he talked about the making of good trouble, and he was talking about community residents who are activists, who participate in making change and making the kind of structural change. I'm wearing this T-shirt today. Tanya, says "Schools, Not Prisons." This is a T-shirt designed by a group that we support here in South Central Los Angeles called the Youth Justice Coalition. And their vision, and these are young people These are people not from UCLA or USC or Harvard or Rand Corporation. These are young people who have been in the juvenile justice system, who are committed to changing the system themselves. And what their vision is to close youth prisons in Los Angeles and across the country, and replace youth prisons with community-based services of mental health and drug treatment and family counseling and other kinds of support. There are European nations who don't put young people in prison. They just don't do it. They keep them in the community and they provide them the services they need. And so we have a youth justice system that criminalizes poor health, criminalizes poor mental health, criminalizes poor social and emotional health. And these kids, most of the time, what they need is mental health supports and community supports and mentoring programs. They don't need a probation officer who's locking them up. So that's what people can do. Just vote, civic participation, whatever you're passionate about, get involved. Citizens and regular citizens can put pressure on elected officials to make these changes. But you're going to see over the next 7 to 10 years, you're going to see youth prisons close in the United States of America because of young people who've decided to get involved and who've decided that they've had enough of this kind of system.
That's amazing. And it really does. And we saw the youth engagement. We saw it visually. Okay. As we, as the protests, were in their height. And what I, not to condone, the destruction in any way, but what was most powerful was to see the youth engaged and really a diverse group.
That's right. Yeah, the Sandy Hook shootings. You saw, white kids from well-to-do neighborhoods, as well as Black and brown kids, Black and Latino kids, who live in violent ridden communities, coming together and challenging Congress to do something about all these weapons that are on our streets. So yeah, and young people, what we've learned is when you invest in young people, in community organizing, in neighborhood organizing, the Schools Not Prisons campaign, the Health for All campaign we're supporting here as well. Young people told our foundation that they were being criminalized in schools by being suspended and expelled for behavioral issues, not violence, not drugs in the classroom, but kids acting out. And we know, kids do act out. But unfortunately, there was a suspension and expulsion epidemic against Black and brown kids across the country. School suspensions up 350% across the country. And these young people are challenging and demanding that school districts give these kids, keep them in school, try and keep them in the classroom and give them the supports they need, rather than just expelling them, which basically means once you expel a kid from school, you're just telling that kid, I'm giving up on you. I don't believe in you anymore. Yeah. That's the worst thing you can do to a child who's having trouble, is to expel them out of school and suspend them out of school. You got to try and keep them in the classroom, keep them in school, and give them the supports they need. So these young people are on fire, and they're the ones that are leading the charge. And last thing I'll say on this point, a lot of the great civil rights heroes that we on my wall, I got pictures of Nelson Mandela and Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy and Dolores Huerta, Cesar Chavez. A lot of them became organizers and activists in their teens.
Yes.
And in their early 20s. John Lewis, when he spoke at the 1963 famous March on Washington, he was 22 years old. Young man. Right? And so these young people have fire, they have energy. They're the ones that came up with Black Lives Matter, not my generation, not our generation, T. Their generation came up with Black Lives Matter. So yeah, young people are on fire right now, and they're the ones that are going to stir up the good trouble that John Lewis said we need to engage in to change structural racism in this country.
I absolutely agree with that. And this was a quote from from, I'm supposed to be showing this, from Apostle Burton, another brother, hermano del Bronx. Okay, he just wanted to make sure he highlighted that justice will not be served until those who are unaffected are as outraged as those who are. It really does. It really does take. So, given the current situation with the schools, how do we now reach the young people that are not necessarily, in the building?
Yeah, I mean, our foundation, that the organizations we fund and we support, increasingly we support organizations that are at the grassroots level. We fund young people who are in the business of organizing and inviting other young people to do that work. And so right now, it's our belief that civic activism and civic engagement is the key, is the most important thing we can do to a healthy community. I know when we talk about health, the first thing people think about are doctors and white coats and clinic offices. The CDC research tells us that 75% of what influences your health has nothing to do with doctors and health insurance. That 75% of what influences your life expectancy are the structural conditions that we grow up in and that we're surrounded by. If you live in a neighborhood that is a violent community, if you live in a neighborhood without access to parks to get exercise, if you live in a neighborhood that's next to a freeway or a highway or a factory where the air is of poor quality and kids have asthma at greater rates, if you've got a housing project with a lot of cockroaches that can spread and trigger asthma attacks, these are the kinds of things that are hurting Black and brown folks around the country. And so we need to change those conditions. Changing those conditions is as important, or maybe even more important, than having health insurance. And having health insurance, of course, is critical. But it's these other conditions. And you have to be out, I think, to Apostle Burton, you have to be outraged. And you can show it any way you pick to show it. But as Professor Zendi just, as he said in his book, the book about being an anti-racist, where he says, it's not good enough to not just be a racist. Like, you can't just say, well, I'm not a racist, so I got nothing to do with that. Professor Zendi is saying, listen, if you're saying you're not a racist, but you're not fighting racism, you're part of the problem. You're still part of the problem. So being an anti-racist is not enough. It's just like if you were in Nazi Germany and you were watching the Jews get carted off to the ovens, but you weren't doing it, that doesn't let you off the hook, okay? Or when we were enslaved in this country, but you weren't a slave owner or a slave master, that doesn't let you off the hook. You have to be in the fight. You have to be in the fight for justice. And I think that's what Martin Luther King and John Lewis have been saying to us for a long time, that you have to find a way to be in the fight, even if it means just voting, but find a way to be in the fight.
There are very simple ways to do that. I mentioned it earlier, off of a community awareness call, actually a forum with our city council members in Wilmington. And we're so distracted with, yelling and screaming at each other. We're so dysfunctional that we can't even operate within the limited power that the city council has. And so that's the example as leaders that our community is seeing. And what we're talking about, what you and I are talking about, is engaging ourselves, our neighbors, okay, in the fight itself, because that's what the health issue is. It's really, I know that stress in and of itself is something that absolutely kills. Okay, it absolutely kills. and it doesn't serve us in any way. So you said very strongly that these young people are going to make a difference. Share with us, from your view, what gives you that hope?
Well, there's a strong history of it. I mean, the civil rights movement of the 1960s in this country was led by young people. You remember SNCC. Of course, Martin Luther King was a young man when he became engaged. Here in California, not as well known a story outside of California, but even after Obamacare was passed, which was a great piece of legislation led by President Obama, it still left a lot of people without health coverage. Among them, many immigrants and many undocumented immigrants. And here in California, we saw young people, young undocumented Latinos lead the charge to make sure that the state's Medicaid program would provide them with health coverage. I mean, they did that. The school suspension issue that I mentioned earlier, these young people organized themselves. They ran a campaign. That campaign led to 5 bills that hit the governor's desk. The governor signed them, and we've seen a 50% reduction in school suspensions ever since the governor signed those bills to make sure that school districts were doing the best to keep kids in the classroom and in the school and not suspending them. They're leading the charge in closing youth prisons here in LA. They've already closed 3 youth prisons, and we've seen that. So and we've seen it with Black Lives Matter. Those 3 sisters who co-founded Black Lives Matter were in their 20s when they did that. Mm-hmm. So young people are the key, but young people want to be in relationship intergenerationally. They want to work with elders. They want to know of the wisdom of the battles that we fought. But I think the key to, if we're going to have a health system in this country that covers everybody, no excuses, but all of these ridiculous copays tied to your job, and you lose your job, and all of a sudden you don't have health insurance, if we're going to see a massive transformation of our health system, if we're going to see a massive transformation of our justice system, if we're going to see a massive transformation of policing and community policing, if we're going to move budget dollars from SWAT teams to mental health services in communities, young people are going to be leading those fights and leading the charge. I think it's up to our generation to support these young people as much as we can and to provide them with not only our wisdom from battles we've fought, but also get behind them and support them in their work, voting for the kind of people that uphold the policies that they want to see.
Absolutely. The other thing is that I know, when we grew up, we had examples of that. Okay. I remember, your mom out there in the community,
Yeah, it was an organizer.
and leading the charge. Yes, an organizer, we just, we went out of our way, my family went out of our way in order to do that. My parents. Okay. So we saw that. So it's not, we hear about the job of the young people, but it is our responsibility to put them in position in order to do the work that is necessary. That's right. What some, in other communities, we see that happening, but we don't see that, in our community as strongly as it needs to be. That's How right. is it that we can make that happen in a way that moves the needle on change just a little bit further along?
Yeah, well, we believe in agency. And agency is the ability and capacity to use your own power to make change. And we've seen it in young people that have been mentored and supported. There's if you have a chance, Google the mayor of Stockton, a young brother named Michael Tubbs. There was an HBO documentary about him recently. It might even still be playing. But Michael Tubbs was a young person in an organization that our foundation supported in Stockton. Stockton's up the state a little bit between, say, Fresno and Sacramento. high poverty rates, high unemployment, over-incarceration, hyper-incarceration. And Michael Tubbs became a young community organizer in this organization, was mentored, supported by adults, ran for city council in Stockton at the age of 24, I think, became mayor of Stockton at the age of 26. I don't think he's 30 yet, but that brother has recruited young people into his administration. And they're working at city council and they're getting some things done. They are completely revamping community safety and neighborhood safety by having an innovative advanced peace project where young people who have been arrested for violent crimes, particularly the leaders of many of these gangs, are being recruited and trained and paid as peacekeepers in the community. So instead of these guys leading the charge on shooting violence in the neighborhood, they're the ones that are taking up the responsibility and the obligation of keeping peace in the community. And it's working. Homicide rates are down in Richmond, California, and in Stockton, where this program has led the way. So that's an example. Michael Tubbs is an example of the kind of young person who gives me a tremendous confidence that the moment that our nation is in right now, the very troubled moment that this nation is in right now, that we're going to turn things around with the leadership of these young people for healthier communities.
I love that that is the direction that we're going in. What I would love to see is some collaboration, okay, between, what's working in the programs that are working in one state, or in one location, or one community, and one neighborhood into another. You don't have to reinvent the wheel in order to get those results. I'm looking on the Facebook page, and I'm so glad. I have to give her a shout out here as well. Danielle Hall is a candidate for lieutenant governor, and she has jumped on. Hanifa Shabazz had joined us, and she's the president of the Wilmington City Council. Your point of view on how to make solutions happen is refreshing. Do you see that happening, at your level across the board?
Yeah, I think more and more executives in positions like mine are learning that, I suppose there's wisdom at places like Harvard and Yale and Johns Hopkins and UCLA. But the best experiential wisdom is from people who are closest to the problems, are most impacted by the issues. That's where the wisdom is. Brian Stevenson, the great Brian Stevenson, who created the Equal Justice Initiative and was the subject of that feature film with Jamie Foxx, Just Mercy, great book, also a great film. But Brian Stevenson talks a lot about the importance of being proximate. And what he means by that is the closer you are to the pain and the impact of an issue, the wiser that makes you about the solution. And so we've tried to, we've stopped at the foundation. We've stopped coming up with our own ideas. We just try and fund organizations who are closest to the problem and then follow their wisdom in terms of how they want to fix it. Just like that idea about closing youth prisons. I never would have thought of that. I would have assumed that maybe we can reduce the number of them and maybe we need to reform the probation departments. But these young people say, no, we don't need to put young people in prison. Get them out. Get them in the neighborhood. Get them in the community. Get them the services they need. And so that's the kind of, we have to be able to trust those that are closest to the problems, those that are closest and most impacted by structural racism and racial injustice. And if you listen to them right down the street here, T, there's an organization called Homeboy Industries. You can Google them. founded by a priest from the Bronx, by the way, Father Greg Boyle,
Ah,
who believed in what he's got a great book out. But he believed that young people in gangs turned to gangs because they didn't have community. And so he created an alternative community for these young men in gangs called Homeboy Industries, and he trains them for jobs. They have social enterprise businesses. They've got a bakery. They've got a restaurant. They have a T-shirt business. If you go to Los Angeles Airport, there's a Homeboy Industries cafe. And it's run by these young people who were formerly gangbangers and gang members who were seen as a menace to society and seen as throwaway individuals. And now they're creating peace and well-being in the community. So, yeah, we now trust completely people that are closest to the issues and closest to the problems. And that's why in your community of Wilmington, those folks running for city council, y'all got to vote, vote, and make sure we get the right kind of folks in those city councils, in those county supervisor, county positions, in the state legislature, because those are the kind of folks we need making the decisions about where the money goes.
absolutely. In in Wilmington, just yesterday or last evening, there was one death and 4 shootings. We ran a video on the other forum that I was on that really had Wilmington as the least desirable place to be. That's unfortunate. It is unfortunate. But what the people see is they don't understand the functions, of people in leadership, and they feel like it's something that they can't do.
Right.
What you're sharing with me are stories that say young people have figured it out, and are stepping out there. What kind of things can we, as a community, really do to, like you said, take it proximate, take it down to, the least common denominator, and really make some changes?
Yeah, I think one of the things we probably all need to do, or all be aware of, is more young people and persons of color generally running for office. And it doesn't have to be president or Congress. It can be school board. It could be the water district. It could be the transportation board. There's a lot of resources that flow through the hands of these public entities, and we need our young people and Black and brown folks in those positions, and Black and brown folks who understand what an anti-racist agenda looks like, who understand that, right now, if you look at the budgets for most cities, the biggest item in the budget is police.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not saying, I know some people don't think we need police. I'm not saying we don't need police. I wouldn't go that far. But I would say that when Father Greg at Homeboy Industries is serving former gangbangers at a cost of around $3,000 to $4,000 per person per year to do the training, and he's turning folks who are deemed as criminals into job hunting, tax paying citizens, right? So Father Greg has a program at Homeboy Industries which keeps people off the street, gets them in jobs, gives them the support services they need. He even has a tattoo removal service for people who need to remove some of their gang tattoos to help get a job. But that cost is $3,000 to $4,000 per person per year. And what it costs for us in the state of California, I'm sure the numbers in Delaware are not that different. In the state of California, we are spending $180,000 per juvenile inmate per year.
Oh my goodness.
The cost of incarcerating an adult is between $125,000 and $165,000 per inmate per year. Okay, so that's where your taxpayer dollars are going right now. They're going to hyper incarcerate, over incarcerate at a very high cost, And you know, for $160,000, you could fund a community-based program and get a lot done for $160,000, right? And so that's the key. The key is like young Mayor Tubbs in Stockton is getting young folks and young people that are socially justice minded and oriented in these positions of decision-making authority, because it took us, you know, it's taken us 40 or 50 years to get to this point. I hope we can get out of this mess faster than that, but it's not going to happen overnight. But the most important thing we can do, especially this November, vote, vote, vote.
Absolutely. Vote and complete the census. Vote and complete the census. Vote by
That's right.
mail. There is still time for you to do that. You can go to, you know, the website for the Department of Elections. You can find out where your polling place is. You can call your local representative. You can get in touch with me. I will tell you where it is that you need to go. I will help you get a ride if you're going to go out there. Okay. And do that. It's absolutely incredible. We just had a comment from Billy Anderson. He's coming on real soon too. This is my month of gentlemen that are on Talks with Tanya, and it's like $125,000 a year to imprison someone in the state of California. And where is that money going? Is it public prisons or are they privately owned?
It's both, but the private prison industry, the for-profit prison industry, is one of the best stocks you could buy right now in this country, unfortunately. And so one of the things we've done as a foundation, you know, we have our foundation assets. Those dollars, we have them invested in certain issues to, you know, to make money for the foundation, so we can give it away. But we won't invest in tobacco. We don't invest in guns. And 2 years ago, we stopped investing. We pulled all investments from prisons. So we won't invest in any corporate or for-profit prisons as well. That's another place, by the way, where you can have an impact. If you're with a company or you're with a university institution, where is their stock? Where are their dollars invested? Are they investing in climate change? Are they investing in the community? Are they investing in economic development opportunities? Are they investing in entrepreneurial opportunities for Black and brown folks? Are they investing in prisons and tobacco and alcohol? So that's another place where your voice matters if you're with an organization that has the ability to invest those kinds of dollars.
Yes, when you shift the dollars, then you get attention. Okay,
That's right.
It's a tremendous amount of attention when we are, you know, looking to do that. There's so many things that, you know, just some other suggestions from the folks online, you know, in terms of getting people to vote. Ramona Dominguez is saying that she made sure that all of the young women on the college basketball team were registered to vote. There's still an opportunity for us as adults to really impact and make a change in you know, where we're headed. Just to shift the conversation a little bit, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about you know, where you stand, you know, in terms of COVID-19. I hear so many times. I just heard it yesterday. Actually, no, this morning. When this goes away, then I will do this. Give us, you know, kind of what your view is in terms of, you know, what's next and you know, where do we go with this COVID-19 issue?
Yeah, an extraordinary disproportionate impact on folks of color in this country, particularly African Americans and Latinos as well. You know, unfortunately, the statistics around COVID's impact from a public health perspective, it's disturbing, but it's not surprising. It's following the same trends that we see in stroke, hypertension, heart disease, diabetes, certain cancers, mental health issues. Um, Black and brown folks, particularly as I mentioned earlier, if you live in the wrong zip code, we get the short end of the stick. So the COVID impact has followed those other trends. And this is why I know, and you and I both, church going, God fearing Black folk, Tanya. But we do have. Let's put it this way: the Lord helps those who help themselves when it comes to their health, right? And so this issue of um, of poor health outcomes, like in COVID or in stroke or in diabetes, being bad luck or bad fortune, is nonsense. These are structurally determined, manufactured disparities in health outcomes that are predictable. And so COVID-19 has followed every other chronic disease that plagues Black and brown folks in this country, and that is we've had a predictably terrible impact. I think, obviously we're all crossing our fingers about a vaccine being developed, but COVID-19 unmasked structural and racial inequality in this country in a very big way. And so, we may get a vaccine to help us get better and protect us and immunize us from COVID-19. Hopefully that'll happen sooner rather than later. But it still leaves us with the structural inequality. It still leaves us with Black folks and brown folks dying sooner and dying faster from other disease conditions. And until we change those conditions, again, what we call them the social determinants of health, which means that poverty is bad for your health, poor housing is bad for your health, hopelessness is bad for your health, lack of economic development is bad for your health, prison is bad for your health, juvenile incarceration is bad for your health, bad schools are bad for your health. All of these issues have structural implications for our health. And so we're more focused on, we're letting other folks worry about getting the vaccine done. We're more focused on those structural inequalities and how we can change the conditions that people live under in their communities so they can get to better health and better wellness.
Yes, absolutely. People now are not, looking to go to medical facilities. But there's something that we can do at home, and I know myself and a group that I belong to, the Etheric Touch. We're about healing, okay, and that's what I hear you saying. Okay, that's what I hear you talking about, is that healing within the community, and nobody's coming to save us. No one is coming to save us.
Yeah, probably the number one public health issue in this country, and I know this will be maybe be a surprise to some of the listeners and audience, Tanya, is trauma. Exposure to trauma in childhood and adolescence is another one of those terrible predictors for health. And there's been a study done, it was done at Kaiser Permanente, but there was a study done that demonstrated the more doses of childhood trauma you experienced, the worse your health is even 40 and 50 years later, right?
Wow.
If you look at the issue of women in prison, easily 60 to 80% of women in prison have been physically or sexually abused or assaulted. Easily, okay? 60 to 80%. That's really not an accident, right? That's predictable.
Yeah.
And so that's why wellness and healing spaces and healing opportunities are so critical. Whatever you can do in your own space around wellness and healing, whether that's meditation or prayer or whatever it is that you do. But trauma has doses of trauma, witnessing violence in the home, a parent being incarcerated while you're at a young age, watching a drive-by shooting in your neighborhood. Doses of trauma have a neurophysiological effect on your brain that impacts your social emotional well-being and impacts the decisions you make. There's a part of the brain that is called the amygdala, the limbic part of the brain. There's a part of your brain that's negatively impacted by doses of trauma. If you've been sexually molested or sexually abused as a young woman, yeah, it's true. Some people tough it out and some people get over it, but a lot of folk never get over it. Never get over it. And it leads to their mental health issues. It leads to addiction. It leads to prison and jail. It leads to hopelessness. It leads to homelessness. And so we need a health system that recognizes the importance of healing from all this trauma. And if you're Black or brown, you throw racism on top of that. And so that's why we need a health system that recognizes the importance of healing, wellness, and exposure to trauma as a child.
Absolutely. We have a couple of questions from the viewers from Kenya. Bain, she sounds somewhat like someone familiar. But what do you do to combat the misinformation which leads to the confusion on health issues?
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing better than a truly educated consumer of health issues. The problem is, social media and the internet, and a problem, and it can be very difficult to distinguish when you're seeing something on a social media platform or on the internet. Is this true? Is this right? I would say when it comes to your health, there are particular websites that have what we call peer-reviewed medical information, which means that a series of experts have reviewed that information and have deemed it worthy of publication for the public. Now, most of the internet doesn't do that, as you and I know. But if you're dealing with, for example, cancer, or you're worried about a particular kind of cancer, go to the Mayo Clinic website, or go to WebMD, or the American Cancer Association. These kinds of medical and health websites, and I'm not saying doctors are experts at everything and that they should be the final say, but you've got to trust information and social media on a website that has been reviewed by medical experts that are trained in that particular specialty. And that's going to give you the best information possible. There's just too much misinformation out there. And so if you see it on the internet, I wouldn't believe it until you check it out at a site like the Mayo Clinic or WebMD, or the American Cancer Society or the American Diabetes Association. These are the kinds of institutes and institutions that carefully vet the kind of information that shows up on their websites.
Absolutely. That's great. There were a couple other comments and questions. There was a comment from Claudine Ford. Thank you. To check out the Black in nonprofits on Facebook. There's a lot of opportunity to help, Blacks and people of, brown people with these organizations. You're absolutely right, Claudine. These are the organizations that are, like you said, proximate to the issues, and definitely
Yeah, I lost you for a second there, T. But yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
We need a new. There's an increasing consciousness right now in the field of philanthropy around funding Black-led nonprofits and Black-led organizations. We need to see and do more of that. These are folks, as you mentioned, that are quite proximate to the issues which make them experts on it. And again, I mean, there might be a 27-year-old out there who's going to create the next Black Lives Matter organization. You just don't know until you give them an opportunity. But yeah, absolutely, we need more Black nonprofits, Black-led nonprofits And we say Black-led, not just the executive director, but boards of directors as well. More Black folks on these nonprofit boards, give them the kind of support they need, and they won't disappoint.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. A question, what do you believe that we can do to, this is interesting, to increase Black spending with Black small businesses, and also to patronize the Black banks and the Black-owned financial institutions as well? How do we encourage people to really keep it in the house?
Yeah, I mean, not an area of expertise for me, but I will say that, ever since, I don't know if you remember, Tanya, back in Philadelphia, there's a name of Reverend Leon Sullivan ring a bell.
Yes, yes.
And Reverend Leon Sullivan was an important faith leader in Philadelphia around economic development and economic empowerment. And it was Reverend Leon Sullivan who came up with the Sullivan Principles, which laid out a blueprint for white corporate America to divest from holdings, for-profit holdings in South Africa. Made a huge difference in the international movement against white apartheid in South Africa, that helped to contribute to setting the stage for Nelson Mandela coming out and being supported by the international community. And so I say that because all it takes sometimes is one person.
Mm-hmm.
At the University of Delaware, I don't know what their contracting looks like, but have they ever had an audit of how many Black-led or women-owned investment entities that their dollars are being invested in? What about the state legislature? And so it's up to citizens, ordinary citizens like yourselves, to call the question and call these folks into accountability. What is the percentage, or what is the number of Black-led contractors I'm making up the University of Delaware, I just call them out, at the University of Delaware or at DuPont? At DuPont, is anyone looking at how many consultants and managers and investment firms and Black-led contractors that the DuPont Corporation invests with? I'm sure somebody must be looking at it, but you have the ability and capacity to raise those questions, put that pressure on, and now's the time to do it. Now's the time to do it because of what has happened with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Jacob Blake. Now's the time to put pressure on these institutions and make sure that they're contracting with Black-led institutions and Black-led investment managers, Black-led caterers, food services folks, janitorial services, information technology services, communication services. There's a lot of contract money out there by these universities and these corporate institutions, and how many of them are going to Black-led organizations?
And not very many. You called out one without even knowing. Specifically, the same thing, and I have to say, I had them on guests on just a few weeks ago. The Women's Bank at the University of Delaware is leading an initiative, that and ended up, having a conversation with the governor and also with the state district attorney with regard to, issues around policing and so forth. And as a result of that, they have engaged additional athletes and persons, at the University of Delaware that are beginning to look at those issues. But it's not the first time that it's been brought up. All right. But now is the time that we can really press them, for those for change.
Yeah, and raising these issues, as you know well, you're going to make people uncomfortable, but that's the only way you get change. And a lot of times, particularly the initial folks who do it, they either get ostracized or laughed at or stigmatized. I mean, look at Colin Kaepernick. You know, that brother was, you know, had the courage to bend that knee, was ostracized and kicked out of the NFL, definitely had a terrible negative impact on his career. But all of a sudden, you're seeing Black Lives Matter on the NBA court, in the NFL end zone, and the NFL commissioner is now saying, yeah, what a hero Colin Kaepernick was. Sorry, I missed it the first time around. So, you know, raising these questions is always going to make somebody uncomfortable. But that's what social justice is about. Social justice isn't about your comfort. It's about creating the discomfort to usher in real justice.
Absolutely. We need to get comfortable with our uncomfortable. Staying in so Dr. Ross, give us some closing words of encouragement for the viewers. Well, first I want to say this, is thank you for the viewers, because we have quite a few who have joined us in spite of the fact that Gladys Knight and Patti LaBelle are on social media right now having a battle. So that's how important this conversation has become. But that said, I do appreciate.
I'm surprised we had anybody joining us with that kind of competition.
Absolutely.
So let me close it with one of my favorite quotes, and it's from John Lewis, a civil rights icon, John Lewis, before he died. He said, "Democracy is not a state; it is an act, and each generation must do its part to help build what we call the beloved community, a nation and world and society at peace with itself." And so I think what John Lewis, echoing Martin Luther King, was, you know, all hail to the good troublemakers, the activists, the advocates, the private citizens and community residents who stir up trouble on behalf of social justice. All it takes is one person to start a movement. And so it can be, we're at a moment where it can be feel so easy to be overwhelmed and powerless with what's going on, but we each have the power, and we each can find a way to exert that power in our own way on behalf of social justice and racial justice in this country.
Yes, we can all make a difference. I believe that each and every one of us is the change that we are waiting for. You cannot just wait for someone else to make the change. You know, nobody is coming to the rescue. You know, we are the ones that are going to be able to craft our solution. We've heard about the young people that are making a difference, and if we shift the narrative and we shift the focus on and make the investment, you know, we've already talked about how few dollars it takes in comparison to you know, keeping someone incarcerated, and you know, there's incarceration, there's a physical incarceration, and in my opinion, there is mental incarceration. And those of us, again, who are not part of the solution, you know, I'm saying that you are mentally incarcerated as well. And I am hopeful that these discussions, you know, shift and pivot you to look at things a different way. Dr. Ross, Bobby, thank you so very much for joining me today. You know, my love to you. I appreciate your time. Thank you for all that you have done. And we're going to have you back again real soon. I'm putting together a panel of experts to share a little bit more. And if you'd like to invite some of the you know, success stories that you have, we would love to collaborate and really begin to turn things around and make some things happen. All right, stay right there, Dr. Ross. To my audience, thank you so very much for joining me again this evening. Stay tuned for next week Talks with Tanya. Also, you want to go to Talks with Tanya, the podcast, which can be found on all the podcast networks. So you'll be able to hear the audio portion of this on the podcast as well. As always, thank you so much for joining me, and stay inspired. Here we go. Oops.